take notes.
Big Meech!
We're here.
My man Alan Houston.
It's different this time, but it sounds like you're
Reggie in town. Alright guys, so we're back with another show. I'm here with the two gentlemen who probably watched as much Frank as I did over the last month. Danny Small is the editor-in-chief of Elite Sports New York. He covers all New York sports, but specifically focuses on the Knicks. Check his stuff out. Spencer Pearlman, you remember him from our Summer League wrap-up show. He does a whole bunch of stuff. He's going to be an NBA scout in a few years. Wait for it. Check his stuff out as well. We were committed. We watched all of FIBA. We saw how the French Prince performed pretty well overall. Definitely raised his stock, if we're going to put it that way. Not the amazing tournament that some people might pretend he had, but definitely showed a lot and stuff to, for Knicks fans to look forward to. Just real quick before we really get into it, Danny, I'll start with you. Just quick thoughts on Frank in the tournament as a whole.
Well, I mean, like you said, he didn't have this incredible, statistics going off through the roof and everything, but he showed up in big spots. He played great defense, which we already know, and he showed, willingness to play point guard, hold the ball a little bit. I know they switched him off a little bit sometimes too, because they just had other good guys who could handle it. But overall, I think it's definitely a step in the right direction for Frank heading into next season.
What do you think, Spencer? What was your thoughts on Frank just in general of what you saw in the tournament?
Well, going off what we just said and how, you're either on one side of the debate or the other, I'm going to go out and say Frank is clearly the best point guard of all time after him showing No, I mean, yeah, everything that Daniel said, it was good. The defense is as good as it always is. Well, I mean, the defense was really good for huge chunks of it. But the offense, it's cool because you saw him actually play more of a point guard role, but it's not like he wasn't Chris Paul, he wasn't only running 1-5 pick and rolls and all that stuff. It was a motion offense, and I love motion offenses, and seeing Frank actually succeed in that type of setting is pretty cool, and it makes you wonder what he could do with an actual system in the NBA.
Which may not be in New York, which I think is the crux of it, and we'll get to that later. But overall, and Spencer, something I want to talk to you about specifically, we saw a really confident Frank. Some of the things people have harped on, whether it's a detractor on, who doesn't like Frank or someone who loves Frank, is that there's a weird fit in New York, especially since whatever plan that Phil Jackson had for him when he drafted him was immediately tossed aside when he was fired a couple of weeks later. So whatever Frank was supposed to be in New York, we never really saw or never really see in terms of commitment from the front office or even just a system in place. So he's always been this weird fit. Then you look at him in France, however, and you really feel like, even with the limitation that Frank still has, you get the feeling he's so comfortable. He's with his countrymen, so that's obviously another level of just confidence and comfort. But the system works for him. Like you mentioned, motion offense, something he feels comfortable in for an offensive limited player. And it felt like he was able to pick his spots and, being the right spot. So how much did you feel that confidence played a role this tournament for him? And is there anything there, even though it's with France, he's coming back to a New York team that's not going to be anything like that. But is there anything you think that will carry over, or something you saw that maybe you're hopeful for or looking forward to the season?
So I'm going to start with the second question first, because I'm probably going to forget my answers before I get to it. But I do think the no hesitation from the outside, I think that's going to translate, just because, the last couple of years, it was never just that catch and shoot. There's always that catch, then maybe half second, and then he shot it. When he was playing in France, when he was off ball, the guy got him the ball, he was quick to shoot, or he was quick to make a move, which I guess is even more, relevant and impressive, and really what he has to be able to do. But I think that's definitely there. I think his handle also got a lot better. Against the U.S., they pressured him. I think it was a little bit more, so he had to use his body to actually keep them off of him. But when you're 6'7" with a 7'2", whatever, 7'3" wingspan, you can do that and still be fine. I just like it when he's actually facing the offense and seeing everything that's happening, because he's a good passer. He's a quick, decision maker. So, that when he's actually seeing everything, he can make the quick decisions.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the confidence, I thought that was definitely the biggest thing.
Like you
You know?
said, he had that quick trigger. Like I saw, you
Yeah.
could see even when he missed. And speaking of his
Yeah.
handle, I was really just watching closely. I don't think, a lot of teams trapped him. Australia trapped him a couple times. They really tried to get him in the backcourt. And I don't actually think he had some dumb turnovers over the tournament, but I don't recall any being him just being straight up stripped for having, by getting trapped or getting a doubled or something. Danny, just in terms of his handle and then his confidence overall, what were your thoughts on how he kind of progressed through the tournament?
Well, I think you guys are right. His handle was pretty good. The thing you brought up before, he was making timely plays. Like he made some timely buckets, and I think for him, a big thing for his confidence was just that he had Fournier, he had Gobert, he had Nando De Colo, he had these experienced veteran guys who he could lean on. And then you see in like the USA game, fourth quarter, they need some buckets. Fournier's getting locked up. Like Frank, no hesitation, was like going to the basket, was all in. That's exactly what you want to see, because he's never going to be a 20-point scorer like a Knight. But if he's a strong defender and then he can be confident in those situations when you need a big bucket, that could be huge for him going forward.
For me with Frank, it's never really been the competition. It's always usually his mindset. Because I've seen him against Golden State taking Klay Thompson off the dribble, doing things. I'm like, what the hell? And then a couple of weeks later against the Bulls and what's that guy's name? Ryan Yeah. And he just was completely unaggressive. I felt afraid to even attack him. So for me with Frank, it's always just been what's going on in his head more so than who's in front of him. Any thoughts on that, Spence?
Yeah, that goes back to the confidence, and I think part of that has to do with the coaching staff. We saw last year with Fizdale, like he gave Knox a really, really long leash. But Frank could go out, he could make a mistake, and it seemed like 2 plays later in the next dead ball, he was pulled. And I know Frank's not really a great fit, I guess, for what Fizdale really wants at point guard, but I don't really think Dennis Smith Jr. is either. If the whole defense thing that he's preaching is
defense,
yeah, that's actually what he wants. But it's the aggression. Like there was one play he came off the screen from Gobert and he pulled from 3, and I think that was maybe it seems good like a handful of times over the last 3 years, and then even going back to like his FIBA stuff. He never did that, and this was, it was a screen. He ignored the one side. I think it was the rescreen on the other side. He came down, and then the defender was like 6 feet back. He 1-2 dribble right into it. Like that's the aggression. That's the confidence. It's everything that he needs to, go into next year.
Yeah, I don't know if it's against Germany or Dominican Republic. I can't remember, but that dunk attempt, which was kind of see from Frank. And, in hindsight, I look at the pictures and I see he really got fouled. It made me even more excited because every little thing with Frank is exciting in any way. Speaking of just the Knicks and the system, Danny, one thing I know you've been, vocal about is, Frank and Gobert. We saw how that tandem worked, and even saw Frank's rookie year with KP. Frank funneling guys into the paint, having them to run into KP, who's an excellent rim protector, and how that worked on the defensive side. I know their defensive metrics were off the charts that rookie year with Frank. So how do you think, do you even think he's going to get the chance? But, Frank and Gobert, we saw what a, potentially elite perimeter defender with an elite rim protector can create, because France's defense was stifling at times. The Knicks have someone in Mitchell Robinson who can, fill a lot of the, fill the stat sheet in a way that Gobert can and do a lot of the same things in terms of his role, though he's not as strong, not as experienced. Do you think it's going to translate at all? And then secondly, is it even going to get a chance to happen?
Yeah, well, we'll see if it gets a chance to happen, because I think one of the things is, I love the idea of pairing, Robinson, who's similar to Gobert, obviously has a long way to go before he, reaches that level, but he's a similar player. He can protect the rim. Frank's, can be an elite perimeter defender if he continues to develop. And, you brought it up with Porzingis. And the thing is, we didn't really see much of Frank and Mitch on the floor together last year. I forget exactly how many minutes they had, but when Robinson really came on and he really started to play well, Frank was hurt for most of that time. So we didn't really see them too much together. I would hope that, Fizdale, he says he's a defensive guy. I would hope he would want to see and, try out a defensive lineup, because even, offensively, Frank looked fairly comfortable running pick and roll. Like, Spencer just talking about that 1-2 into that pull-up three. Like, he looked, fairly comfortable in the pick and roll. I mean, is he James Harden? Of course not. But he looked like he's kind of getting a little more comfortable. I'd like to see what they can do on offense because, I mean, also Frank's tall. You just throw it up to the rim. Mitch has shown he can go up there and, catch balls that he has no business getting to. So I'd like to see those two. And another one, kind of like a combo I'd like to see would be possibly Frank and RJ Barrett, because I think we've said this before that Frank is he can play point guard, but he's not necessarily like the guy who wants the ball in his hands like all the time. It's good to have that secondary ball handler, guy who can kind of take over in some bigger spots, because that's what they did with Fournier, that's what they did with DeColo. I think Barrett has that potential. Obviously he's going to have his growing pains as a rookie, but Barrett has that potential of being that guy with Frank where they can kind of just go, back and forth, on ball, off ball.
Yeah, and let's talk about RJ and Frank quick before we kind of wrap up and talk about the USA game as well, which is really his shining moment. The RJ Frank thing, see, me and Spencer were like, yes, because honestly, on tape, it makes so much sense. 2'6'7", French-speaking guys, and you wonder, I think RJ needs the ball in his hands. You saw in Summer League, once he stopped just being a two-guard trying to shoot and had the ball in his hands more and playmate more, he looked way more comfortable and played a lot better. And it feels like that combination makes so much sense. But then again, Spencer, I go back to this. I don't know if it's going to happen. And I know we said this on Twitter. We were talking about this. I think we all have this inevitable feeling that Frank's not going to be here. Like, whoever Frank ends up being just won't be here. And it'll be like, oh, remember when he was on the Knicks and they couldn't figure him out, blah, blah, blah. And you'll see him in the playoffs in the Western Conference doing smart things. But about that Frank-RJ combination, Spence, what are your thoughts on that? And what percentage chance do you even think we'll see it?
I think we'll see it for a little bit. I just don't think we'll see it for enough to actually, draw mass conclusions from. But in terms of fit, again, like I think those two at the 1 and the 2, or whatever, I think they're completely interchangeable, and I think they're the best fit together. Like, I'd rather have those two guys playing at the 2 guard positions than Dennis Smith and RJ or Elfrid, or I guess Lamar Peters also, just because you have 2, plus pick and roll players. If Frank's shot's going down, I trust his shot actually more than I trust Dennis Smith Jr.'s, because his is more fluid with no hitch, and Elfrid Payton, I mean, he's pretty useless, I guess. Not completely useless, but he's a ball dominant point guard. And then defensively, you have guys who can switch. And then, I mean, I think that's what the Knicks are going to have to do in order to stay somewhat close to water level and not completely sink this year on defense. So I'm all for seeing those two guys get good amount of minutes together.
Yeah, and Danny, what are your thoughts on that combo and your percentage chance you think it's going to happen?
I'm kind of on the same bandwagon as Spencer. I think we'll see it, but the percentage chance of us seeing it for an extended period of time or past this season even, I would say that's a lower percentage. I don't know an exact one I could give you, but I don't know if it's going to stick around for very long. I'd like to see it, obviously, but we'll see.
I mean, it's a lot for Physio to figure out. We got a 50 and deep rotation, so that's another video. But back to the World Cup really quickly. What I really loved about Frank as well, and this goes back to his pre-draft stuff and everything about him, was he really rose to the occasion in the biggest moments. We saw him against the USA and Argentina, the 2 toughest games of the tournament back-to-back. And his 2 best performances, you could say, especially considering the opposition. Against the US, clutch play, step back on Kemba, which I still can't believe happened. I remember watching it thinking, oh, this is not going to end well. And then Frank's licking his fingers. He got pistols up. Yeah. I'm like, who am I watching? He had a great play late in the game. Spencer, you were bringing up his length earlier. And he had this layup against the US late in the 4th where he just drove to the rim and just extended like Stretch Armstrong or something. And had this layup, and all I could think was, yes, go to the rim. His free throw rate is atrocious, and that's why his points per game is pretty low as well, because he just doesn't get to the line. But against the U.S. and against Argentina dared him to shoot. They were all over Evan Fournier, and Frank just kept finding his spots in the flow of the offense. Ended up with 16 points, I think his career high for France. So Spence, looking at those last 2 games, really the toughest opposition, the most important games. What were you really encouraged about seeing him at that stage? Because I think, looking at FIBA, he's 21 years old, and I love people in the NBA will say, well, that's nothing. Derrick Rose MVP at 22. But in that tournament, he must have been easily the youngest guy playing crazy minutes that late out of every team. I'm thinking, I may be missing some on the top of my head, but I feel like he must have been the youngest guy playing crazy minutes like that, in the last 8 teams that were playing.
It was
Outside
definitely
of the
one
US.
of them.
Yeah, outside the US. Yeah.
I mean, again, it was the aggressiveness. Like, he was, if there was a shot he wanted to take, he was taking it. The finishing in the paint against the US, I think he had 3 paint finishes. He had the first in the first half, the left hand off the left foot, that I don't think I've ever actually seen him make a finish like that before. So I mean, that was definitely really nice. But I mean, he didn't back down, and that was just about getting that consistency. I thought he was pretty consistent throughout the entire tournament, just not worrying about being pulled or making a mistake. Like, he made mistakes in the pick and roll. He lost his man off ball a couple times, but didn't matter. I feel like next defensive possession, he was making a stop, or he was making the correct, shot attempt or quick swing pass or something, and he was comfortable.
Yeah,
I think that's kind of like the best way to describe how, at least I thought he played the last few games.
Yeah, and Danny, your thoughts on Frank in the clutch, in the most important games of the tournament?
I mean, obviously the USA game is the one that everyone's going to remember and everyone's going to take away. But I think just, his guts and his effort against Argentina. I mean, no one else on France was, really having a good game at all. They needed any, bit of life that they could muster. And Frank was the only one, making shots, like attacking that aggressive, Argentinian defense. I mean, obviously he wasn't enough to, ultimately start the comeback, but just seeing him, kind of, willing his team of, all NBA Rudy Gobert, big time player Evan Fournier, and Frank is there, trying to drag them to a win. I thought that was good to see, even in, a loss. And 16 points, that's pretty solid. I think it was 12 shots for the day. So I mean, those 2 games are great. Obviously, the Australia game was a little sour taste in your mouth after, but I think the whole thing, you can take away so many positives for this from Frank.
Yeah, and let's wrap up FIBA just in general right now. You see Fournier, by the way, tampering now, saying he needs opportunity. Orlando were in for him. I remember at the deadline, and apparently the Knicks declined. But it's always felt like Orlando was going to end up with Frank, Jonathan Isaac, and Mo Bamba, and just have the longest
team
wingspan. And Isaac made crazy leaps last year as a defender, so I wouldn't be shocked if I see it happen at some point. But to wrap up FIBA, I think generally speaking, this went way better than even maybe the most ardent Frank fans thought it would. I remember before the tournament, there was like a joke or a meme about Frank killing the USA, just like it might happen. And no one really thought that would happen. And here's Frank in the clutch doing things like that. So for me, even if his performance in the tournament was pretty good, not amazing, like some people might pretend it was pretty good. But for Frank's stock, just even in the NBA and his own confidence, I feel like it was, it couldn't have gone much better considering where he ended last season. And Danny, what are your thoughts just on Frank? Final thoughts on Frank and FIBA and heading into the season based on, what he was able to do this summer.
I mean, I think you're right. I think this is like a great stepping stone for him. But if his NBA career is going to really take off, like that, it has to be a stepping stone. Like he can't go into this year, and I know it might not be in his control, everything like playing time and whatnot, but he has to carry this momentum in, play well for the Knicks. Even at the very least, if he's not going to be with the Knicks long term, he needs to show that he deserves another shot somewhere, perhaps in a system more suited to his game. So I think I'm really excited to see how he really takes us into the season.
Yeah, and Spence, your final wrap up on Frank and FIBA Frank. That's what the hashtag.
FIBA Frank.
Yeah, it was fun, and last year, the flashes, I guess, are pretty sporadic, partially due to the sporadic playing time and the weird roster construction and all that stuff. But it seemed like this series, like the FIBA tournament, every game there was something that you could take away that showed growth, whether it was the improved finishing, the improved handle, his strength. They were switching, and he was playing the post a little bit more on defense, the shot. I remember watching his FIBA stuff from, was it the U18s, and I think it was the last game he might have had like 30 points or something, and that was the best
final, right? Yeah, he had 31 points. He was insane. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a loaded team, by the way, for France. But yeah, I mean, this is probably the most aggressive I've seen him play in a big game, and I don't think I think very few players in the tournament have played in a game as big as the France versus US one, even if it wasn't the final. Like the fact that everyone was watching this, and scouts absolutely were watching this too, and they saw him not backing down, and you know, all the steps that he took, I guess, in the offseason. Yeah, I mean, it's a wind-about way of saying I thought he was good, and I think there's a lot of reason for optimism for this season.
Yep. So let's see if it happens. Thanks so much for being on, guys. You can find Danny. He's the editor-in-chief of Elite Sports New York, and his Twitter handle, I'm going to have it up on the screen as well, but it's at DWSmall8. Spencer, you can find him at SK Pearlman. He writes for the Step In. You know his stuff. Check him stuff out. Both these guys did amazing coverage of Frank throughout FIBA. So if you want to go back on Twitter, look at their stuff. You're going to see amazing threads really breaking down everything about Frank and what we saw this summer. Knick season starts very soon. Training camp's coming up soon. So we definitely have you guys on again. But thanks so much for being on, guys, and take care.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having.